everybody, it's Jean here. Jean Truelove from Truelove Quilts for You, coming to you from my wooded sewing room. I have a small tutorial for you today. This is not my own design, and I'm not taking any credit for it whatsoever. However, I tweaked a certain pattern that I found. I was looking on Pinterest for just some little things to make, no great big huge projects, you know that right now. And I came across a little, like a slouchy little bag. I thought for like a beach bag, for diapers, for crafts, for knitting, for an overnight bag. And I was looking at the pattern, wonderful, and it was on Pinterest, and it was the link took me to Fave Quilts, F-A-V-E Quilts. The original designer apparently was Melissa Rawley, who designed this pattern. Not my pattern, but it was a free pattern and all of the instructions are right there. I was looking at the pattern and I thought, oh, it called for is either 6 or 10 or 12 fat quarters. And I thought, oh, that's a lot of fabric. That's a lot of fabric. So I actually, and it was a real sweet bag, I actually went to the comment section, and quite a few comments were, love the bag, made it, but it was miles too big. And I thought, even though the pattern tells you to cut down the fat quarters, but apparently it was a bit too big. And then it gave further instructions on how to make it with the elastic and everything. So anyway, I looked at the pattern, and I just thought, well, I can make that smaller and just have a few little tweaks that were my own. So that's what I have done. And the bag, I made 3 of these bags. I'm going to give away 2 as gifts when I see people. But the first bag I made, I sort of made almost to the directions or the instructions of the pattern using a larger piece of elastic. The one I'm showing the tutorial on, I shortened that elastic. But the first one I did, it's sort of like a boho bag. I think it's absolutely delightful. It's this slouchy, super lovely, patchworky, hippie, boho looking. I used 12 10-inch squares. That's it. 12 10-inch squares and about 1 1/8 or 1 1/4 of lining fabric, one piece of lining fabric. There are no raw seams. There's nothing raw edge on this. Every single thing is completely finished, fully lined, and I've put the casing on because the nature of the bag. I use two different fabrics for handles. Real nice way to make a nice patchworky bag. Now, by all means, you don't need to make it a patchwork. You could have made 2 solid pieces of fabric, what about 1 1/8, 1 1/4, something like that, and just put them together. But I think the beauty of the bag is the patchwork looking. This is the first one I made, but as you can see, I had put cam snaps on the corner here, right from where the handle meets the elastic, but the elastic was a little bit too slouchy. It was too slouchy, and even though it closed, it was sort of like too big. Although it's awesome for the beach, fantastic. I have to tell you, this bag is huge. Even with the 12 10-inch squares, it really is a very, very, very large bag. The handles are just on a casing, so they get bigger if you want. And the elastic, so that was my first attempt, which I love, which I think is awesome, but it was just a bit too slouchy. My second attempt was this one here, and again, I used like a sort of almost a brand new, but like a faded, sort of not a homespunny. You could use flannel. How awesome would that be? You could use denim. I mean, to really make it sturdy and of course reinforce all of the seams, really make a sturdy bag. I got the elastic on this one a little bit better. I shortened the elastic piece. However, I explained to you, I can't close this bag. Okay, I just can't close it. It's just an open little tote, which is fine. But I quite like the idea of using a right here between the elastic and the handle casing, the strap casing. I quite like the idea. I used a cam snap, just with a little tool that I have. But you could use a magnetic catch or a sew-on catch snap to actually sort of close the bag to a certain extent. you can't close it here because of the handle, but you could close the sides. And I didn't have enough room for when I actually made this little bag here. Sweet, sweet. Again, very, very large bag, which I think it lends itself to this lovely sort of soft, shabby, boho chic, patchworky, hippie look. Okay, I made that one, which was awesome. But then the one I'm actually doing my tutorial on is this one. Okay, I'm doing my tutorial on this sort of a very soft, almost like it could be a soft little diaper bag or a little girl's overnight bag, a pajama bag. And I got the elastic on the sides right, and I allowed enough room between the casing and the elastic for my snap. I actually put on a cam snap, 2 different colors. I used 2 different color handles for the straps, 2 different color fabrics, I should say. And again, I say that you can use a muslin. You can use just an inexpensive muslin for the lining. However, I used a really pretty fabric so that the whole thing, if you open it up, is just a real pretty, just real pretty. Very practical. Again, I tell you to reinforce your handle casing so you can hold quite a lot. I mean, you can't hold a bag of groceries, but you know, some bread and some fruit at the market, absolutely. It's a really nice, sturdy bag. And I think quite a lot of uses for it. Again, I put my snaps on, and I put them on. I put them on at the end, and I show you how I do that just in fast motion. Now this bag, I would say a beginner can make it. I really do. A beginner could make this bag if you have your 12 10-inch squares. My tutorial is about half an hour long. I think of the evening time I made this, I think I spent maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at the most. My tutorial shows you it's all straight stitching. So of course I'm going to speed up my film, because you just see me straight stitching, bzz, 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 straight stitching, and I take you every step of the way. Now again, I used 1/2 inch, it was old, you'll see it sort of yellowed, but it was fine. I used 1/2 inch elastic. If you wanted to make the casing a bit deeper and heavier, you can use 1 inch elastic, and I show you how. I think the original pattern that I had seen online was a 1 inch elastic, but I didn't have that, so I just used 1/2 inch elastic, and I shortened it a little bit. And again, as I say, there are no raw seams in this bag, and the way I did the actual lining, it's in 3 pieces, so that you don't have to, when you go to insert the elastic in the casing, you don't have to like make a slit. You do need a sharp seam ripper. You do need a sharp seam ripper, because we're just opening a seam just about 1/2 inch to threadle our elastic through. But that's my little tote bag tutorial this today. I think it's so very pretty. Again, you don't need to do it a patchworky. If you just wanted to do a plain fabric, probably about a 1 1/8 yards, and then you could skip to when you put the back and when you put the top and the backing together. So, but this is my tutorial, and I've just used my 12 10-inch squares, showing you some pictures of this one that I made. Oh, it's so lovely, really sweet. Again, you can see the fabric really makes a big difference. And this one, which is a little bit brighter, awesome. I see an old-fashioned like knitting bag or taking it to the beach. Super way to use up some 10-inch squares that you have left over. I had mine left over from a project. I had a few 10-inch squares left over. So I do hope you enjoy this tutorial, folks. And again, yeah, that's my tutorial. And again, thank you very much. And yeah, love from the Trueloves. Bye-bye. In my lovely little boho bag, I'm pulling fabric that I've had other projects with. This isn't quite a full jolly roll, and these aren't quite 40, what would it be, 42 or 40 inch, 10 inch squares. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using 12 10 inch squares. So I'm just going to be pulling out 12 different squares. Now, that's my 12 10-inch squares. Now again, I had pulled this roll of, it's not quite shabby chic, some leftover 2.5-inch strips, but I had noticed in here, where was it, as I was rolling it up, there's a pretty, actually that's a pretty orange, but the back of it is a pretty pale. It's a paler, like a pink. So I won't use the orange, I'll use the reverse side of that. You do know you can use the reverse sides of fabrics, right? And I like the idea of having two different handles. Two different print handles. Because again, it's very, very shabby chic. And again, because I'm using some blues, that's too bright, but the reverse side of that sort of goes real nice. So I have that, put these aside. I am going to be pulling, so that's my handles, that's my bag, and then I've just grabbed a little over a yard, maybe 1.25 yards of lining fabric, okay? I have a 1.25 yards of this lining, which you can use a muslin because it won't be seen, or will it? It sort of does. It sort of will be seen. So I have a pretty fabric, but by all means you could just use a plain muslin to keep the costs down. Scraps of fabric really. And then to finish up, we're going to be needing 14 inches of either 1/2 inch wide. This is 1/2 inch wide, or you could use 1 inch elastic. And when we get to that, if you're choosing to use 1 inch elastic to make our sides, you can do that by all means. And I'll show you how you just make the casing larger. You will also be needing 2 40 or 40, whatever these are, 42-inch strips of batting. These are 2.5 inch, maybe about 1.5 inches wide. About 1.5 inches wide, because all we're going to be doing is we're just going to be enclosing the batting and making our little handles. I've laid out my 12 10-inch squares. There's 3 in each row, and I've done 4 rows. So what I'm going to do, this is the top of my bag. This is the top of my bag over here. So what I'm going to do, I like that. Again, you don't overthink this step, because you're going to see all of the fabrics that you choose. Just some are going to be scrunched up a little bit more, but this is the beauty of this scrappy looking bag. So you don't want to overthink this. Just grab 12 pieces that you think go pretty, and by all means lay them out like this. So we're doing 4 rows of 3 each. So what I'm going to do, sewing machine, and I'm just going to pick them up like this, and I'm going to just, the first 3, again, pretty side to pretty side, and that one, and then put it back onto put it in front of my sewing machine, and I'll do my 4 rows. I have my pile right next to my sewing machine here. So my first 2 on my first row, I'm just going to sew these 1/4 inch, and as you can see, because these are cut from the same 10-inch square package, they are cut perfectly, well, maybe not perfectly square, but they're pinked beautifully at 10 inches, hopefully. So I'll just take my next one, and what I'm just going to do is I'm going to continue sewing my 3 rows. You don't have to pin this, I'm just putting my needle down. I'm sewing these at 1/4 inch. So now I'm finished the outside of my bag. I'm just going to go over, I'm going to iron these. I'm going to iron these seams really good. I'm going to press them really well, and then I'll show you what we do next. I've sewn all of my squares together, and I have ended up approximately with a piece of fabric that is 39 inches wide by, or excuse me, 39 inches long by 29 inches wide. Okay? Now, what you're wanting to do with your other your lining fabric, at this point you're going to be cutting one piece of fabric 29 inches by 29 inches. So I have my lining fabric here that I've cut 29 inches by 29 inches. And what I'm doing is, with the leftover fabric here, I'm going to be cutting two pieces that are the 29 inches by 6 inches. 6 inches. I have my 29 inch by 29 inch piece of lining, and with the pretty sides together, I'm taking my 6 inch by 29 inch, and I'm going to be sewing a little bit more than half an inch. Back stitching at the top and keeping my raw edges together and keeping about half an inch. Now this might be slightly big, but it's better to, and I'll show you again in the next step, it's better to be a little bit big than it is to be exact or small. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my iron and I'm going to press that nice wide seam right open. I've put the right sides, the pretty sides of my seamed lining to my 10-inch square piece, and I've clipped it, as you can see. It fit pretty good. Don't worry if you're like a quarter inch off. Just trim up whichever. Trim off the lining or trim off the underneath, just on the edges. If it's because it's difficult for me to get it exact, you know me and measurements. But with this seam allowance, it was pretty good. I just had to trim slightly. I just had to trim slightly the lining to make it a little bit smaller. Or to make to make the 10-inch squares a little bit bigger. That's right. I just had to trim it slightly to get it to fit. But it's fitting. It's fitting now beautifully. The right sides are together. Now I just want to again, if you've been watching me, you know this is what I'm doing. What we're going to be doing is we're keeping an opening from here. Let me just get my camera around there. We keep an opening from here to here, and you can see I marked it with a little line there. Okay, this opening is on the shorter, or is on the shorter side, the 29-inch side. It is not on the wide 39-inch side or 38-inch side. Now it is on the shorter side. One side we're keeping open so we can turn this inside out, and as you can see, I've made like a little L here. All right, this little mark here. What I do, and again, if you've been following me, you know this is what I do, but if you're new here, this opening, when we go to turn it, mind you, there's not a lot of stress on this because it's a big opening and we can just turn it inside out. There's not a lot of interfacing or anything like that, but I do this anyway. I start my stitching this way, and I make a bit of a stop. I go in 1/4 inch, because we're just sewing this 1/4 inch. I go in, I start over here, and then I put my needle down and pivot, and then I stitch along. That way, I stitch around the whole thing, and then I come over to here when I want to stop it. Oops, where am I? Up here. When I want to stop, and I come to this point here, keep my needle down, and then I turn and I switch my fabric to that way, and then I go from there off my fabric 1/4 inch, and I backstitch. That way, when we go to do any kind of opening, there's a stop there. There's a stop. I've stitched all the way around, leaving an opening on the side, and now I'm going to turn it right side out, and I'm going to press it really, really well up to my seam allowance, rolling that between my fingers so I get a nice, even, nice flat little case here. So there is my opening, which again, no stress, turned in perfectly. Now what I'm going to do on the right side of my bag here, my pretty side, I'm going to go over and I'm just going to stitch about an eighth of an inch away from the top. Just make a pretty decorative top stitch all the way around. And when I do that, I'll be back. I've top stitched all the way around my case, and on the right side, or if your stitching quality is nice, you can do it on the other side. But on the side that has the seams, okay, you want the side with the seams. We are now going to make a casing from seam to seam for our elastic. I'm going to be cutting my elastic in half, so I have about 7 inches of elastic, okay? But whatever size elastic you have, maybe you have very wide elastic that you had in your stash, or maybe you just have this 1/2 inch. This is old elastic that I've had. As you can see, it's a bit yellowed. I'm just going to sort of measure it from my top stitching, just go down a little bit to the very end, and I'm going to make a nice decent sized casing. I'm going to back stitch there, and then figuring out that I wanted nice casing, maybe an eighth of an inch, a quarter of an inch on each side to make it easy to run through. I'm just going to eyeball my casing, and again, this is on the long side that you are putting your casing on, okay, between where the seams are, on the seam part of your bag, okay? I'm just going to eyeball. By all means, you can mark it if you wish. Now this is where, I said in the beginning, you're going to need a nice sharp seam ripper, okay? We see this seam right there, okay? From this seam to the other seam, we're going to thread our elastic in, but it's obviously closed. With a nice sharp seam ripper, you're just going to go in stitch by stitch and release those stitches just between the top stitching and that casing line. Okay, you just fiddle there you go, fiddle your blade in there. The stitching should come out fairly easily because our seam also has been pressed open, okay? And this way, the reason I put the seam, as I've explained before, is just so you don't have to like put a slit. Again, this is, if you saw, I could have easily just put the same exact size as my top, just put right sides together, but then made the casing, but then to put the elastic through, you would have had to slit. And this way you can have a nice finished edge to make your hole. You see that? You see that? There's my finished edge. So with my safety pin affixed onto the end here, let me just cut this little thread off. I'm going to very carefully just slide it in, keeping it nice and flat. We don't want it rolled. Once it goes, it's nice. There you go. Just keep it nice and flat. But you want to be very careful at this point because it's a short piece of elastic and we're gathering quite a lot of this fabric into our seam here. You just want to, as you thread all that along, you want to secure this end. You want to hold it. You want to secure that end just temporarily. That's secured. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my safety pin out, holding it all the while because I don't want it to slip back in. And wait a second, my thread's come undone here. So let me just hold that and I'll just redo my thread. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, with all my fabric out of the way, I'm just sort of going to nudge that, just nudge that bit of elastic right back to the edge there, just so maybe a tiny little bit's coming out, and then I'm going to stitch down. Now I am on the reverse side. I'm just going to secure my elastic really a lot. Okay, I'm just going to go from casing line, casing seam to top stitching, and I'm going to do this quite a lot. My lovely gathered sides of my bag here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make the casing for our handles to thread along through. So with the shorter side, again with the short side, okay, we're going to turn this edge, keeping our gathers away. We're sort of going to turn this edge in about a little over 2 inches or so. Okay, keeping it nice and straight because we've sewn it straight. We're just going to press that. We're just going to iron that casing down. Okay, you're going to go from end here to end here and just iron that down. It almost goes up to the elastic, but it doesn't quite. Okay, make a nice crease for our handle to go through. Now I'm going to do both sides. What I'm going to do is because our handle is only about half an inch, maybe a little bit wider, I'm going to go down about 1/4 of an inch, make a nice little casing for a little ruffle, and then on this end here, I'm going to go where we've stitched it. There's stitching there. You can just hit that stitching right there. That'll make a nice casing right there. So I'm just going to top stitch right there from end, securing it because there's going to be stress there, and I'm going to go this side. Go right down. I'm going to do that on both sides. So as you can see, I've stitched down about 1/4 of an inch from the top there, and then I've stitched along this side there. Okay, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side, keeping my gathers out of the way. This has been pressed, this has been ironed really well and stitched really well, and then you want to just turn that in, making sure you turn it in really nice, edge to edge, keeping away from oh, look at that. I didn't catch my, or did I? Oh no, I did catch it. I didn't think I caught my elastic there. And it was coming out. No, it was all scrunched down this end. Oh, I had a bit of a panic attack there. No, it's all caught there. So now, oh my goodness. I'm just going to iron this down, measuring about a little more than 2 inches or so, end to end, and I'm going to stitch that on both sides, making my handle casing. So at this point, this is what we have. Okay, looks a bit funky to be a handbag or to be a tote, but this is what we have here. Okay, gathered, nice gather between there. Your turn over for your casing for our handles, and it's important to have a little bit right here. I'm going to be putting a little cam snap. I don't think I'm going to show you, but I'll show you at the very end. I'm going to just attach a little snap here. If you wanted to do I'll have addressed this in the beginning, if you wanted to do a magnetic catch or a hook and eye or a sew-on snap, you could, but I find to secure that edge right there, I need to have a little bit of a flat area right there. So don't put your lining right up to the elastic because you won't have a place to secure it, but I'll show you that in a minute. Right now I'm going to do my handles. I've made one of my handles here, of my straps I should say, and if you've made handbag straps, this is sort of a cheap jack way to make them. They're not fantastic, but they don't have to be. The only part, because it's sort of boho-y, the only part is they're nice and padded the way I'm making them. The ends are sort of just a bit janky, just just turned into. I'll show you how I've done that. But it's nice because it's soft, and it's, again, sort of like that boho slouchy look. So I've made one of them, and as I showed you, I had done it on the wrong side of the fabric because I like that side. It was a bit too bright for my other. So again, here is my 2.5 inch strip, and what I've done is I've just the length of my strip here, I've cut a piece of batting, and I have there's a selvage on there. That's okay, I can just stick that in. And again, there's a really proper way, but what I'm going to do is like that and get rid of that, and with this piece of batting sort of centered, I'm just going to sort of tuck this in like this. Okay, I'm just going to tuck in both sides, and then I'm just going to sort of fold it in half. Okay, so my end is not all that wonderful, but that's okay. Put my needle down so I can secure it, and then with my batting, right with that enough, what is about 1/2 inch to flip over, I'm just going to tuck. I'm just going to roll and tuck my sides into my batting like that, and then I'm just going to go down, just roll and tuck it, as you can see, going down one side, keeping my batting straight like this, and just rolling and rolling that bit over. Like that. And just like that. I'm going to put my needle down, I'm going to turn, just securing that end, and then right back down on the other side. And there we have two lovely straps. No, they don't match, but that's the whole point of this sort of shabby chic looking little bag. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a nice sharp safety pin, and I'm just going to thread all this through my casing. Love it. Super. All right. Thanks, folks. Love from the Trueloves. Bye.